Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity hosted by the Maine Department of Education. My name is Joe Schmidt, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the DOE. Today, I am excited to be hosting one of my dear rock star elementary teacher leader friends, Stephanie Nichols. She's a second grade teacher at Narragansett Elementary School in Gorham. She's here today to talk about using children's literature in teaching elementary social studies. Stephanie is a regular contributor in some of our webinars. Has done multiple since COVID had struck, and part of that is her connection. She is a participant in the DOE Social Studies Teacher Leader Cohort and is one of my few, again, elementary people who've gone through that program, and a lot of training and a lot of work. So I'm always happy to share the great things that Stephanie is doing in her classroom. Stephanie, I'm going to turn it over to you. She's going to present and she's going to take questions. So she's going to take you from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Hi, everybody. I feel like I always do the double wave teaching second graders. Good afternoon, especially elementary school teachers. I'm sure you guys are just kind of finishing up and probably maybe still working in your day. Like Joe said, I am here today to talk about some of the ways that I use children's literature to teach social studies in my classroom. I know that as elementary school teachers, it's not always a carved out social studies time. Sometimes it can be very difficult to find that time to teach social studies when we have so many other high demands and areas of academic study that we have to really focus a lot on. So I have a couple sections of literature that I use. The first thing that my co-teachers and I do, first of all, I work really closely with a team. I think that if that's something you're able to do, it really makes a huge difference. Or if you're able to collaborate with anybody, your school librarian, if you have a local bookstore, I find that that's really helpful for me to find resources. So one of the things that we do in second grade is we have really kind of taken the shift from learning about Thanksgiving and really more focusing on Indigenous Peoples Day and Maine Native Americans. We are really going through our curriculum to make sure that we're meeting those standards in Maine social studies and making sure we have uh, lessons that address Maine Native Americans. So what we do is we have a few books. I brought my books home today just to kind of like hold up and show. I did let Joe know I will type these up as sort of a bibliography. And so that will be accessible when Joe had mentioned this will be posted on the DOE website. He said there'll be a link there that you can click to access the list of books I talked about today. So one of the books that we use Thanks to the Animals, which is a really great book by Alan Stockbasin, who is a Passamaquoddy storyteller. One of the things that we do is we connect these to our social studies standards that we have to grade students on. We connect this with understanding communities. So what we do is we really take Maine Native American history, culture, and we tie that to the second grade social studies standards of communities. What are communities? So what we do is we start introducing the topic with students with a story, with a literature resource. So we usually do Thanks to the Animals. One of the teachers, we kind of go in rotations. We use Kunu's Basket, which is a really great book by Lee DeCora Francis. It's Kunu's Basket, a story from Indian Island. This book is also, I believe, available on Epic online. So if you use Epic online, reading it all, when we realized we only had one copy of this in second grade, we were loaning it out and struggling who was reading what, and then we found it on Epic. So we read some of these stories to students, and then we talk about communities and what are communities. And so we kind of segue that into learning about the different tribes of Maine. We look at their representing symbols and flags, and we go from there and we start to talk about how would you represent your community on a flag? And so we really use that as a segue into teaching about communities and ways to represent communities. So what we do is we do a lesson. I have a Google slideshow that we use. We talk about the different tribes of Maine, we see their flags, and then students have the opportunity to then create their own flags. This year I had students, we're in Gorham, I'm at Narragansett, so we did a flag to represent Gorham, the community that they live in, and then we did a flag to represent our school community at Narragansett. It's one of our really, really fun units. The kids really start to sort of get that more diverse perspective a little bit, that maybe they didn't quite have yet at second grade. It's still pretty young. So that's one way that we use literature and Maine literature. Kunu's Basket is written by a Maine author. So it's a really nice way to tie in using children's literature, teaching about Maine Native Americans, teaching about Indigenous Peoples Day, and what that means, and how Maine represents communities. We look at things like the Maine state flags. We look at, and that's after we do the tribal flags. So that's one way that we use children's literature that way. We've also found we really love sorry, my bookmarks in it. We use the Canoe Maker by about David Moses Bridges, um, which is really great. One of the authors is Donald Soktoma. I've had the opportunity to hear him speak about Passamaquoddy history. He's incredible. So I really love this book too. And the kids find this really exciting. I think we did a field trip last year to the Maine Historical Society, and we were able to see um, some exhibits. And the kids were so excited when they recognized a photo of David Moses Bridges because they remembered the book. So the impact children's literature can have is pretty powerful. So that's how we use, or a few ways that we use children's literature with teaching Maine Native Americans. That's a really big part of our social studies curriculum in second grade. Um, Another example, we're definitely, I think, with a lot of schools around the country, not just even in Maine, we're really looking at diversifying our classroom libraries, really making sure that, we are. One thing Joe had kind of said once at a training for teaching Maine Native Americans was, rather than taking time out to do separate units, kind of embedding it into what kids are already learning. And that really stuck with me. And it really stuck with me, not just with the Maine um, learning results, Maine Native American standards, but that really stuck with me with diversifying in general with my classroom library and using children's literature to teach. So around the same time that we're learning about communities, and we're using that through the lens of Maine and Maine Native Americans. We're also talking in November, not just about Thanksgiving, the holidays coming up. I use this book, Binny's Diwali, which is awesome. Diwali was in November this year, so we read about this story. It was really great. Binny has a very diverse class, students who celebrate Hanukkah, who celebrate Christmas, who celebrate all kinds of other holidays. And this way the kids learn about Diwali. So we kind of talk about that as well around Thanksgiving in November. And we made some of the really pretty lanterns. It's an easy activity kids can use. What we did was we used construction paper, and I had little cutout flames. We decorated them, which is traditional as part of the holiday. And then students were able to display their work. So they really enjoyed being able to share that with their families. That was one of the activities we did for Diwali. So it was really cool to be able to, remind kids that, especially in second grade, November is not just about one holiday that we celebrate in the United States. There are lots of things going on outside of maybe our own personal little bubbles. And so that's another way that we use. And actually, this book was in my my wish list for my classroom, and actually one of my students, her mom bought it for me, so I got it in October and was able to use it to actually teach Diwali during Diwali, so it was really exciting. um Kids were really excited. I'd had it up on my whiteboard, and they kept asking, that book looks so good, when are we going to read it? And I said soon, and then I explained to them why we read it when we did, because we were going to be talking about the holiday of Diwali. We learned about what it was, and it was going on at the time. So that was really engaging, really fun, and just as a way to kind of incorporate that diversity learning about world culture, world religion, into our second grade curriculum. So that was my other example. And then there are so many. We also have a book, No Turkey for Thanksgiving, about a girl whose family is from Vietnam and they have duck for Thanksgiving. And so we talked about, and it's not always with necessarily activities, but just having discussions. Elementary school students have incredible discussions. And so we had a really great discussion around that. And one of the things in the story is once the girl, main character, shares that her family doesn't have turkey for Thanksgiving, she's really upset by it. Lots of kids in her class start to share the things that they eat at Thanksgiving that aren't necessarily turkey. So introducing students to that world culture, world religion. One of the standards we have is um, my basically we call it me on the map. It's like my community, where I am in the community, where I am in the state, where I am in the country, and then where I am in the world. And so we really use that to kind of bring that together for them. Um, and then just a couple more examples. One of the things that I really like when we were excuse me, doing the 100-year anniversary of the ending of World War One. I found this really great book that I love. It's called The Poppy Lady, and it's actually about sort of how that tradition of poppies on Memorial Day came to be. So I do this usually every year with students on around Memorial Day time, and we talk about the history of Memorial Day, what it means, and then we make this is just kind of an example. We make some poppies, and this is my teacher example, but we have poppies that say, today I'm wearing a poppy because, and the kids learn about what Memorial Day is and the history, social studies behind that. That's a really fun thing. A couple books I didn't bring home, or I didn't bring with me, are some of our women's history books. We spent a lot of time last year, actually right before COVID shut schools down, um, building our library for women's history. So we have kind of a quilt project going on where students are learning about, in March, learning about different women in science, technology, politics in general. We have that project going. We found some really great who was books, biographies. We're using that right now. I forgot to grab a few of them because one of my co-teachers was borrowing them, but we've really worked hard to diversify our library. So we have a lot of really great resources for Black History Month. Right now we're getting ready to do actually a very similar project to the Women's History Month one. It's a big octagon, there are octagon pieces and it makes a quilt. So we use it as a bulletin board project, but students are taking the time right now and doing a research project on someone in Black history of their choosing. One of the resources we use a lot is Epic. I highly recommend if you haven't heard of it before or haven't used it. The website is Get Epic, www.getepic.com. It's free for teachers, and you can either curate or find shared book collections online. So we have a Black History Month collection right now, my team in second grade. We shared it with families over Seesaw, and students are creating Google Slideshows. We've already done a research project in science using Google Slides. So this is a really awesome opportunity to also bring in families as well with that. So we have a really diverse section of books. We have athletes, we have artists, we have we have scientists. It's awesome. So those are just a few of the ways that we use literature to kind of fit in social studies as we can. I think, I don't have to explain again to social studies, to elementary school teachers, how difficult that can sometimes be to make sure that we're getting in social studies when it feels like there's never enough time. So I feel like I've talked very fast. But I really love it. I think that it's one of the best ways, honestly, to sneak in social studies whenever you can, even if it's not a dedicated unit. Even just the other day, we kind of used my class. I know Dr. Seuss is super controversial, but we have the Lorax we also have done Horton Hears a Who to talk about, environmentalism and history of, of using your voice. And then we segue that into the different history topic that we're covering, whether it's, Black History Month, Women's History, Maine Native Americans. So, there's all kinds of really great things. One book I forgot to mention with the Poppy Lady is I found these really great series of books because I ended up having some students after we read that were really interested in World War I. And the question is like, how do we address that, especially as my background was originally in social studies. I used to be an 8th grade social studies teacher, then I taught 5th grade, then I went to 2nd grade. So how do I explain that in an age appropriate way? And so I found this was one of the books that I found, Where the Poppies Now Grow. I really love it. I was able to go to a really awesome training with Laura Vogt, I think is how you pronounce her last name. She is the education director at the National World War I Museum. And one of the things I really loved, I felt like I was the only person there that was an elementary school teacher. I was like, none of this is for me. But she had a really great list of children's literature resources. So this was one of them. They also have a book about a dog, which is super age appropriate. It's called Flow of the Psalm. So if, one of the things I do when a student really latches and really gets excited about a topic, I try to find as many more resources for them as I can. I'm just checking. Oh, awesome. Oh, thank you, Faith. Faith said in the chat, another great book for older students, which thank you, Faith, for reminding me. I know that this is lower literature. I did teach 5th grade. One of the things I really enjoyed were the Who Was biographies. I think that one of the things that elementary school teachers are really great at is maybe teaching one subject and finding lots of different levels to teach that subject. So, Faith had said another great book for older students, grades 5 to 7, is A Poppy to Remember, which is another scholastic publication. It can be used for Memorial and Veterans Day. Yes, Faith, I have done the Poppy Lady for both before, and sometimes because I used to actually use it to introduce Veterans Day, what Veterans Day was, and where it came from. And then we talk about how now in the United States we celebrate Memorial Day in May, and then I do it again in May. And some of them remember that we did it already, and then a lot of them are just like, "This is so exciting." Um, and then Faith also suggested a video called "What Have We Learned, Charlie Brown." Thank you, Faith, for sharing that. Um, yes, absolutely. So sorry, friends. So friends, I'm used to having the 2nd graders on Zoom. I apologize. Yes. So one of the questions, which was really great from Sarah, was, is there a way we could see the book list you compiled on Epic? Absolutely. So if you go on to Epic, you can type in, I think, my username. I will double check and I'll add that. I'll add that to the resource page for Joe to add to when this is done. If you type in, let's say, and I've done collections for science, social studies, reading. If you type in, let's say, like Black History Month collection, all kinds of collections will pop up. You can kind of see if another teacher has created one that you really like. What I've done in the past is looked at collections and kind of looked at the books that they've added. And what you can do is you can add it to your library. And so you can use it. Epic is a very collaborative space. Or you can create your own. You can kind of take a look and search the types of books you're looking for or a topic, and then you can add a collection to yourself. But yes, I think my username might be Stephanie Nichols, but I'll double check on that for sure. And so we use Epic a lot. I must have tons of collections. I make them we do science. We do a big Arctic research project, and so I use nonfiction children's texts to use. I add them to my collection for kids to use for research. So those are some examples of how I use children's literature, how the 2nd grade team in Gorham at Narragansett uses children's literature. There are probably a lot of things I forgot because I'm so excited. I love using children's literature because I am a social studies person, and however I can fit it in, wherever I can fit it in, I'm going to try to do that. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box. I'm certainly monitoring the chat as well. And if there's anything I can answer for you or help. Oh, Darren, yes, thank you. I just saw your comment. So Darren says these books are great recommendations for Darren as a special ed teacher of life skills students in grades 7 through 9. It's nice to have meaningful books at this level. Thank you. Thank you so much, Darren. I actually started out as an ed tech, and one of my first things I got to do was the teacher I worked for let me kind of design a social studies curriculum for our program was called functional academics. So I got to design a curriculum for them. One of the things I love about Epic is that, like, in one collection, they have audiobooks. So if students need to access an audiobook, um, they also have books that are called Read to Me. So it'll read and it'll kind of like highlight the words, but not a bright highlighter. It just gets a little bit bigger as it goes. Um, and they can follow along so they can read and listen to it being read to them. And they have books that are just books for kids to read. So one of the things I love about using Epic for social studies is that you can include um, differentiated materials, which is really important for sure. And thank you, Darren, yeah, for reminding us of that. Absolutely. Um, so yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't recommend it enough. And like I said, sometimes what I do is if I know that there was a book that came out on a list that I'm like, you know what, that would be great. I always check Epic first to see if it's on there. And if it's not, then I usually go to Amazon. um, and try to find it. Or actually, what I'll do is I'll talk to my local. We have a bookstore in Gorham called the Bookworm. The ladies who work there are incredible. I often will say to them, um, I'm looking for books to teach this in my class this month, and they're really really helpful. If they don't have a book, they'll order it for me. One of the things I like to do too for diversifying our library, there's a group called the Conscious Kid. They have social media accounts, and one of the things that they did in about a year ago, they had released, it was circulating again. Um, they had circulated again a list of diverse books for your library, your classroom library. And so my team and I, we talked about it. We pretty much put that whole list into our budget. We were at a year where we were able to do that. I know not always, but those types of things are really great too. Does Epic have books in other languages, favorites in Portuguese or French? Yes. So I just thank you, Patty, your question. Patty asked, does Epic have books in other languages, like favorites in Portuguese and French? Yes, I know that they definitely have Spanish. Um, I haven't explored, I'm sorry to say, a whole lot. But I do believe that there are some uh, I think there are other language translations of books. Yeah. Yes. Oh, another question. Oh, no, they answered it. Okay. Awesome. Oh, yes. Thank you, Joe. And Joe has looks like a diverse books section on a page that he has. I'm not surprised. I shouldn't be surprised, Joe. You're incredible. All right. Oh, awesome. Elaine, that's a great question. Elaine says, how are you fitting your social studies curriculum into your schedule? Like a reading block or alternating with science? So honestly, in the past 3 years, I've taught second grade. It's been different every year. um, this this particular year, what I'm doing, we have in our reading curriculum, we have a separate word study component. And the way it works, it lends itself pretty nicely to an alternating schedule. Um, so one of the things we're trying to do is this year sort of take a little bit of a chunk of time to alternate. So when we know we get to a certain point in the curriculum with our word work, um, our word study, and the lessons that they give us in our curriculum, are very quick, they're very short. So what we end up having is a little bit of time in the block that would normally be word study, that we have about enough time, I would say about probably close to 20 minutes, to do one of these literature activities. We do, like you said, we do sometimes alternate with science. So sometimes we fit the science into our writing as well. So, like when we were doing the research projects, it was actually part of our writing curriculum. So that worked out really nicely. The science was fitting in with writing, and then we were able to fit the social studies and the reading part of social studies into that word study section. What I try to do too, we also work with our program works with a workshop model. So sometimes if it's, we have 3 centers, it's work on reading or read to self, work on writing, and word work. So what I try to do is, especially if it's a writing activity, maybe to go with one of these books, what we'll do is maybe that's their work on writing center in workshop for that day. Yeah, these are great questions. So, how are you guys finding that how are you guys feeling about fitting in social studies? Do you guys have a block of time? Do you kind of fit it in where you can? How are you guys? I'm always interested to hear about how other elementary school teachers are doing things.
I will let everybody know that if you are
Sorry.
comfortable being recorded and put on, I can open up your video for you to talk. We can also do a debrief session after we've stopped recording if you don't feel comfortable asking the question.
Oh,
As
sorry. I'm so
no,
sorry.
no,
Yes,
and
that's
you're
a
okay
good point.
because maybe there's always things for us to share. I just want people to know I can, if you don't want to type everything out, you can just let me know and I can allow you to talk and we'd have your video up. I just want you to be aware that we are recording you, but we do a time afterwards as well that's not recorded in case you don't want to be recorded. So you do have options if you do want to share and discuss.
Sorry, I forgot we were being recorded. Yeah, no, that's totally fine. If not, I respect and appreciate that. But yeah, so that's some of the examples of how we use literature for children in as a way to teach social studies. A lot of times, what I do is I introduce with a book. We start an activity or a project, and then we go and kind of read other resources as we go. Um, Definitely utilizing Epic, utilizing diverse book lists. Oh, thanks, Faith. So having the opportunity to work with co-professionals to align social studies and science curriculum by grade level or grade span. So I can speak for me. We This year with COVID, it's been a little challenging. We haven't quite met as much, but what we do normally we meet as in so Gorham, for example, we have 3 elementary schools. So what we do is we meet as a whole district second grade. I think at least once a trimester, and we talk about the curriculum, how we're doing, and we have a district curriculum team. So a lot of times, like I know right now, they're looking at our social studies standards. So they do a lot of that work, and then our representatives from like for me for grade 2, our representative will discuss what's going on when we meet as a whole district second grade. And we do that with other subjects as well. Our literacy coach. Yes, that's awesome, Patty. So Patty's talking, saying she's starting to work with their literacy coach to develop Padlets with reading and research resources around a concept-based theme, which is often social studies oriented. That's awesome. That's another resource I completely was like so excited I blew past. But yes, if you have a literacy coach, they're always my first kind of go-to when I'm looking for resources for books, literacy activities to go around something, and especially with social studies, for sure. Padlets are really great resources as well. Having it kind of in that one place, that's awesome. I love that. That's a great strategy. And I think that's so important too, being collaborative. I think, you know, coming from a social studies background, I bring that to my that personality aspect to my team. And I think, when one of our other teachers finds something, we're all excited and we're like, oh, that's so great. So if you have people that you can be collaborative with, it's great.
Last call for any questions for Stephanie. I know they're kind of trickling in. I want to be mindful of everybody's time as well. So I will give you just another moment, one last call for any questions. And again, we can also have, once we stop recording, we can also do if other people, we have found there are some people who just don't want to be recorded on session. So we'll have time for that as well.
Absolutely. Faith, that's awesome. Thank you. Faith said a few years ago, her eighth grade team developed a trimester long integrated curriculum on global climate change, science, physical geography, social studies, international responses. That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I think especially in elementary level, low and high, we're always looking at how can we incorporate as many things as we can into something so that we can feel like we have the time to really throw at it. So that's great. Thank you guys so much. I hope that this, provided with you some resources. And definitely, like I said, I highly recommend exploring Epic if you get an opportunity. Students, you get a class code once you sign up. And so what I do is I just share. My students have a little password cheat sheet that they use, and so I post our classroom code in the classroom. And so kids can use it independently really easily for sure. So I highly recommend it. And I hope that helps.
Awesome. Well, as always, Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your passion and your expertise and your love for social studies at the elementary level.
Thank you for having me.
I will formally say thank you and bid you adieu.